that. And so there's a lot of smiling and dialing, which is a good skill set, I think, to have even to this day, by the way. But pivoted back into corporate recruiting and then spent a good chunk of time, about give or take about almost 18 years in professional services. So I was at PwC for about 12 years, KPMG for about five, and then BDO for about a year and a half. And that's where I really grew my career. So starting as the individual contributor, moving up into manager to director and all that. And I ended up leaving PwC when I was leading Southern California, actually, it was Pacific Southwest recruiting for PwC and moving over into the world of aerospace and defense, which I wasn't necessarily looking to do that, but it fell in my lap and was a neat opportunity. And so I ended up actually moving over to Northrop Grumman. At the time, called it was the aerospace system sector. That has since changed a little bit. And I led a big piece of recruiting for them nationally. Did that for a few years, and then actually got recruited out to the world of entertainment. Never done that before. Sitting in Southern California, probably not a bad idea. So I ended up moving over to a talent agency called Creative Artists Agency. And what they do is they're the agents that represent all the talent, right? So Will Smith was a client, Brad Pitt was a client. And that sounds way sexier than what my job was. But I did get to oversee recruiting globally for them and of everything. So all the corporate roles, agents, everything, which was really a neat role. Had no intention of really leaving CAA, that got recruited out by Amazon. And Amazon is one of those companies at the time, it's changed, but at the time it was in a hyper growth state. The role was really big, and Amazon, they come at you like the Godfather moment where it's they make you an offer you can't refuse. And so moved over to Amazon. Unfortunately, that didn't work out as I had hoped. And so I ended up, rather than going back into corporate recruiting, my business partner and he and I actually worked really closely together at Amazon, and he basically thought the same thing I did. And so we just decided, let's just do this on our own. And so in 2023, we launched our own search firm. And so the name of my firm is Intrepidus Talent Solutions. And Intrepidus essentially means no fear in Latin. And so we thought that we could do something like this in a way that really supports clients, really supports candidates, because not only do we have the network and the chops to do the recruiting and all those things, but we've also been on the inside as talent acquisition leaders. And so we really understand what companies are going through, whether you're a leader, whether you're a hiring manager or your rank and file recruiter, on what happens and what it means when you can't find the talent or can't find the talent quickly enough. And our aim is always to really augment these talent acquisition teams, not necessarily become a talent acquisition team for a company, although we can certainly support that. And so we do executive search, interim staffing, and then we do actually some HR consulting as well, because he and I both, we have similar backgrounds, slightly different industries, but similar backgrounds. And so we've been parts of large HR leadership teams and things. And so we have a lot of experience across all of HR, whether it's certainly the talent acquisition side, but performance management, system implementations, talent management, even comp and stuff like that. So we also support companies in that regard. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell. So again, thank you for having me, and hopefully I can impart a little bit of knowledge and maybe some hope for 2025.
Perfect. Did you have any kind of slides you wanted to share or just
No,
good
I'm more
talk?
of a talker. I don't do this. I don't do the slides that much. I have slides if on my business that I provide sometimes to clients and things, but I'm more one that prefers to have kind of a conversation. So if you folks like, I don't want to derail this because I know we have limited time, but to the extent that there's some questions and things, I do want to make sure that I can answer those,
Sure.
because it's been, let me just start with kind of the context.
Mhm.
So the market, everyone knows, right? So I'm going to start back and just slightly pre-pandemic, right? 2018, 2019. The job market at that point was actually quite robust, or it felt more robust. And I'll get into that in a little bit too, because there's some changes that have altered things now. But then you hit the pandemic, everything was halted, obviously, and everybody knows that. But then when we came out of the pandemic, there was this gigantic hiring spree by lots of companies. And you really had two things going on. You had a lot of jobs, just so your top line number of jobs in the US was bigger than normal. And then you had more people moving around, right? So there was more churn. And so that you've probably all heard called the Great Resignation. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of people that felt very emboldened to move around, get another job, whatever, because jobs were so plentiful. It was about a little over two jobs per person were available in the market. By way of comparison, it's just over one right now. So it's just like to give you some context. But that obviously then has slowed down a lot. You've had, economically speaking, you've had inflation really go through the roof, prices have gone up.
Mhm.
And what that's then Following on to that, you've got the interest rate hikes and all that. And so
Mhm.
collectively, what has happened in the job market is things have just slowed down a lot. So you have less jobs and you have less churn simultaneously, right? So that in the churn part is what's keeping things, I think, down the most as of right now, because people are just not comfortable moving for a variety of reasons, right? So it's one, there's this, they don't see as much opportunity. Companies have taken this time to make their interview processes, in my mind, very arduous and all under the guise of we're trying to be really careful with who we hire, but it's statistically BS. I'll just be honest with you. And so now what I think is happening is we're starting to see a little bit of a resurgence, right? So the other big factor, and this happens actually every year, and so I'm not going to get political with you guys, but whenever there's an election year, things slow down, particularly as you get toward the election, because companies are just waiting to see what happens, right? Because if one person gets elected, chances are you're going to have a different agenda than if the other person gets elected. And so that can alter how people or how companies rather make their decisions and what directions they may go in. So what they do is they tend to pause hiring a bit and wait and see what happens. So that's very normal. The good news is now, and again, not getting political, but with Donald Trump getting elected, there is more optimism in the market now, broadly. And I'm getting this from the people that clients that I talk to and whatnot. For example, I work with a real estate company out in New York, and my friend is their CHRO, and she was telling me that literally the week after the election, they signed 5 contracts that were just on hold. And so that was a positive sign. And then I get similar stories from other people. So there's a lot of optimism as we move into this year. Which now the other thing though that's still going on is, and
See
this
a
is
little
one of those
nudge.
funny things about the job market. And so I'll get into this a little bit because I want to talk to you about the market dynamics is you still have what is considered, particularly in the media, by a robust job market. Now, that is very debatable depending on what lens you look through. But what they do with the numbers, right, is it's okay. So even the jobs report that just came out, I want to say it was yesterday, it was bigger than what people had anticipated. Unemployment went, I think, from 4.2 to 4.1%. And so what that does is it causes the Fed to pause on the interest rate reductions because the market would seem to be all right from a job standpoint. So that puts upward pressure on wages and therefore prices. So it creates the fear that inflation will start to go up again, right? That's how all that sort of ties together. So I think with that, that's going to be, I'm going to call it a headwind as we move into 2025. With the interest rates remaining still high, that is going to tamp down on borrowing and some of the money moving around into companies such that they could do more projects or and therefore more hiring, right? The good news is though, is that in certain sectors, we are seeing things start to tick up, right? So for example, one of the sectors that houses, and if you look at the BLS report, Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is professional and business services is a line item. And that is where a preponderance, not entirely, but a preponderance of kind of the white collar jobs sit as a measurement. That was pretty flat or in decline for the last couple of years. And we've actually seen that tick up over the last couple of months, which is a good sign. So I think for white collar folks, as we move into 2025, it's going to get better. Is it going to be as robust as we've seen in the past? Not for a minute. I think probably in the latter half of the year, it will start to loosen up more. But I even think in this beginning part of the year, certainly as we move into the later part of Q1, we are going to see bits and pieces of the job market look better. The other big thing that is going to start happening is as Trump gets into office and starts to do things, and this is one of those moments where we're going to have to see, right? So he had a lot of promises, obviously, through the election. And by the way, when I'm talking about this stuff, again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm looking at it through an economic lens and impact of decisions. And so if Trump reduces regulations and does things and really gets energy rolling, those things will spur business and it will pull prices down. When those two things happen, that's when I think people will start to feel more comfortable moving, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to see the top line jobs number go up a bit and you're going to see more churn. So that will then thus create just generally more opportunities for people as we move into the year. And again, it's not going to happen overnight. So I don't want to give an overly rosy picture because this is going to take a minute, I think. But I do believe that we are moving into a generally more positive time. this year. Now, a couple of cautionary notes on that, though, is that geopolitics can factor into this, right? The war in Ukraine, depending on how that goes, all the conflicts and things in the Middle East, that can have an impact too on the perception of things. Because by the way, perception is reality for a lot of people, for most people, for all people. And so if there's other kind of black swan event type things that happen that we don't know about, that can certainly have an impact. But provided nothing really unusual happens and we can tamp down on the conflicts in the Middle East and in Europe there, that will be a positive impact, I think, on everything as well. So with that, I think again, it's going to be positive, but give it a minute. And so for those that are still out there looking for jobs, keep looking, keep pounding the pavement because it's going to start to loosen up, although I think it's going to be a bit incremental over time before it really explodes. But the good news is once it explodes, and I've seen this happen in other cycles, once it really starts to move, it will spin up, meaning the job market and more jobs and all that will spin up really fast. It will honestly be faster than a lot of companies can really deal with it with their internal recruiting teams. So that's where I can come in and swoop in and help a little bit, which is what we're hoping for. But again, we've been in a malaise, and I think we're going to be coming out of that malaise this year, and then certainly into 26 and 27, barring any strange sorts of geopolitical events. The one other thing I want to mention too is as you look at these jobs reports, and this is one of those things I meant to mention a minute ago, but I think it's worth mentioning is that what gets reported is oftentimes it's very top line. And so again, it's that unemployment went from 4.2 to 4.1. And but if you look a layer deeper at what's propping up the the numbers, it's predominantly healthcare. So healthcare is going to be a good sector still. It's government, which is not good. It's good for the people that, and I'm not disparaging government jobs, it's not that. But when you have a giant part of that number that has no, that makes nothing, makes no profits, all that, all the government does for its money, right? It's you pay them and then they do whatever they do with your money. But there's no creation there of anything. So that's not a great place to have tons of jobs. And then the last one is historic over the last few years has been hospitality. And so now you're talking about more of your blue collar stuff. It's waiters, waitresses, hotel workers, bartenders, all that kind of stuff. That has now ratcheted back up to pre-pandemic levels. So I think that might even flatten out a little bit, but that has been what's been propping up these numbers largely. And you've got people working like two jobs and things. And so it's when it's disingenuous, I think, when the media or anyone talks about, oh, it's a really robust economy, you just don't know it. That kind of thing, it's really not. And that's why. And so if you're a white collar worker, we've been in, it's been termed, not by me, but I've heard it and I think it's appropriate as a white collar recession. And for those in that kind of the white collar space, that's why it feels the way it does to you, despite what the media and all these things are saying, is because what you feel is the reality, right? There just aren't as many jobs for folks in kind of the broader white collar space as there were. And I think, again, that's why I look at that professional and business services line in BLS, because that is the line item that I think speaks mostly to the white collar space. As that goes up, again, the white collar space will start to see the benefit of that as it relates to the job search. So anyway, I thank you for all of that. Hopefully that was helpful and does give a little bit of context and a little bit of hope. And
That
Diane, I don't know how much time
no,
we have.
that was
There's
that was
any,
wonderful. I think one of the standouts for me was the Bureau of Labor Statistics and looking at that professional services line for
yeah,
those that
you
are
have to
white
look.
collar.
Yeah, you have to look a layer deeper. Like I said, unfortunately, politicians, and again, I'm not talking in the red or the blue. They tend to put out whatever they think is beneficial to them, and that's what's been happening. And but unfortunately, I think the reality is different than what they've been putting out there, and people have felt it. So it can't get away from that. People are smarter than just going, oh, it's 4.1%. I'm all good, even though I'm not working. It's just not how it works.
Yeah, and I think there's a turnaround time. I think I've been in the consumer sector my whole career, and I
Hmm.
know that when we've had these slowdowns before, that certain sectors get hit, and consumer sector sometimes is like the tail end that gets
Hmm.
hit because everybody has to be consuming things. But with the prices that have gone up and everything like that,
Hmm.
we're now seeing the tail end of this impact of 3 years of inflationary measures
Yeah.
and prices going everything. So that's why it is so bad this year and started last year in the fourth quarter because I see a lot of postings from job seekers who lost their job in the fourth quarter of 2023. We're now in the first quarter of 2025.
Right.
So we're going to slowly, it's like a battleship turning around. It just isn't that fast. It
Yep.
takes a while. So I think one of the main reasons I have you come on is because to have everybody kind of level set on the state
Mhm.
of affairs, the state of the market, and then understanding the timeline and how does
Mhm.
one need to be preparing. So, we're not hearing quick fixes here. We're
Mhm.
hearing, it's going to take a few more months, it's going to take for these things to expand out. So
Mhm.
that's really great on that. I think what I'd like to also do is open it up for about 5 to 10 minutes if needed, and open the floor up to any of the job seekers on the call. If you
Sure.
have a specific, concise question for David, so we can keep it within the 10 minutes. Okay.
I was just going to
Thank
say,
you.
Sherilyn.
Thank you. So I was on a webinar earlier this week and where that number of 4% comes from job seekers actually on LinkedIn, and that the real number is more in the 25% range of unemployment. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know if that's right because the numbers that I will say, just to Sherilyn, just to level set, the numbers that I was quoting from are actually from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I don't know. I'm sure LinkedIn, they obviously they collect tons and tons of data. And if there is a 25% unemployment rate somewhere, that might be the case. I have not heard anything that high anywhere in any kind of
Okay.
area. So I think that's probably inflated or maybe just wrong. And again, not to disparage whoever said, but I have not seen anything like that. Now, there are differences, right? So the number I was quoting is really more of an aggregate. And so you're going to see differences even in California or in different industries versus different states and all those things. And so that number certainly is going to look a little different in different places, but 25% sounds pretty high to me. I don't think 1 in 4 people are unemployed in most sectors.
Okay. Thank you.
I
Sure.
think too, if we were at that level, we'd be at that level would be very similar, just slightly under where the levels were during the Great Depression. And we're not quite
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
The other
unfortunately, we
thing,
don't have bread lines and all that yet.
the other
Yeah.
thing to remember too is that with this, all these studies, where are they getting their data from?
Mm-hmm.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics is taking it from unemployment data, and
Mm-hmm.
unemployment data is very firmly trackable because people file for unemployment, they're getting unemployment, it's
Mm-hmm.
regulated by the states, and some states have different lengths of time that they allow people to be on unemployment. But the average that I consistently see on that website of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is 23 and a half weeks, which is just
Mm-hmm.
slightly under 6 months. So it's about 5.5 months. But then you hear people being out of work for longer than that. One of the things that I have heard years ago, I know I heard it from a recruiter. It wasn't you, David, but it was another person I worked
Sure.
with years ago, that what they were seeing, that typically you're out of work 1 month for every $10,000 that you were earning. And that depends on the market conditions. It depends on the industry, on the geographic location. And those were in the days long before there was remote work. And I happened to be in sales at that period of time in my career. But it's always stuck with me because as I was going up in income, I was thinking about that potentially how long, because it just takes a while for those jobs to circle around, I
Yeah.
think.
No, that's a great point, Diana. There are just, as you move up the hierarchy or whatever you want to call it, there are fewer jobs. So there are fewer jobs for directors, fewer jobs for VPs and all those things. And so it often does result in longer times of being unemployed.
Hello, my hand went up. You mentioned pulling the statistics from the Bureau of Unemployment, and that just made me curious because I did not file for unemployment because I'm in a minority because I left. But what do you think? How much does that play into it that people are not collecting for one reason or another?
I want to say there's still trackable data on that in that if you're not filing for unemployment necessarily, I don't know how they calculate it exactly. I'll just be honest with you, but I know that they do try to like lump that stuff in because to your point, people quit. But you got to think about typically when people quit, one of two things are happening. They quit and then they're going to another job. So they remain employed for all intents and purposes, or they quit and remove themselves from the labor force. So as how that labor force number or that unemployment number is calculated, part of it is what they call the labor force participation rate. So that is everybody that's unemployed and looking for a job. If you're unemployed and not looking for a job, you're technically not counted in that number. And I think the labor participation rate of the population is like 62% or something, which is a little on the lower side. So that's another little fungible thing that, and I've never loved how they calculate that because I think it's just so easy to put out bad data, really. But you've seen, and this happens too when you see the economy not going your way, or you've looked for a period of time and you can't find anything, people go, screw this, I'm not going to look for another year. And then they're no longer counted in that data. And so that pulls that number, that unemployment number down a little bit, maybe more so than it would if everybody that really wanted a job was truly calculated in that labor participation rate number.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Diana, there's a question inside chat from John.
Will the recording be posted? Yes, I'm recording this. I will edit it and it will go up on my YouTube page, which is new. I will send out an email to everybody when that's posted with the link.
You can subscribe to her YouTube page, everybody.
Yes, when I get that, yes. Right now I have one up there from when I did the gratitude presentation with Linda.
Great. That's awesome. Congratulations.
There's
Thank
another
you.
question from John.
Yep.
He's asking, how does unemployment benefits apply to recent graduates searching for work?
I don't believe that it does. Yeah, I don't believe that it does. And now if you worked for a company, then and you got laid off, let's say, or whatever, then you would qualify for some period of time. But again, it varies state to state too. So you really would have to look at how your state handles things. But if you just graduated college and you didn't leave a job or whatever that is, then you're not eligible for unemployment.
The unemployment benefits are part of the FICA taxes that are
Mhm.
taken out of one's paycheck. And whenever you have a W-2 job, that's automatically taken out. If you're consulting and things like that, then of course you would be self-paying into the IRS
Mhm.
for in a 1099 situation, you'd be settling that up quarterly with them, and then you pay those taxes plus your income taxes plus whatever. If there's self-employment tax on there, there's once again depends on your state laws and everything like that. But they typically, what the unemployment does is there's a pot of money that's being accrued by them taking these taxes out. And then they look back over a number of quarters to see if you have made enough money in that threshold. So
Mhm.
part-time work, even as you're being charged that tax, the problem is it meeting the threshold that your pot of money is going to be big enough. But that's a great question to get. One of the things I teach is getting extremely clear with your state rules on
Mhm.
unemployment because every state is different.
Yeah, absolutely. In some states, I will tell you, like California tends to be a little more on the generous side than other states as it relates to unemployment amounts that they pay out. And it does vary greatly in length and all that, again, depending on your state.
And John, I see your question. Is there a database for this stuff? It would be at your state unemployment. I don't know what state you're in, but your
Mhm.
state unemployment office would have all the rules and regulations on that. You can either call them, you could go to the website if you are getting unemployment or you did get it. You go to the website, look at their PDF of their frequently asked questions to get very clear on that.
And if you, and a lot of places, so in California, for example, they've got the unemployment offices, right? So if you can't make it happen, they actually, you can do it online for most people, but they have unemployment offices too. And not that I would encourage them to go there if you don't have to, but if you have to, that's another way to get it all figured out too.
It's and this is something, Joe, I'm not sure of the audience here, how many people, how long people have been out or if they're freshly, but this do not wait to file unemployment if you've been downsized. The longer that you wait, they track this by the time. So they're paying in, right? So your pot of money is based on like X number of quarters that you've worked. So if you wait 8 weeks to go file for unemployment, you may have some issues. If you're freshly downsized, you need to go and if you haven't for some reason file for it, go find out about it.
For sure. That is a great recommendation, Diana. And,
Yeah.
and if you look at it this way, I've had people tell me that they feel like there's a stigma with it and whatever. It's your money for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes. You
You
paid
paid
into
in.
that pot. And it is there for a reason, right? And this is exactly the reason. Go get what is honestly due to you and don't worry about any stigmas or anything like that. If it can bridge a little bit of a gap for you, even if it's not a lot of money, it's more than zero. And so I would argue it's better. So I highly recommend doing that if you can.
Absolutely. Any other questions for David? We've had some great questions and great discussions around that. And I think what I'd like to do now is to just take a few minutes to recap. If anybody has any great wins for the week that they'd like to talk about, take about 5 minutes, maybe 8 minutes on wins for the week.
I just had a real quick question.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. But my question is, what is your, and I open this up to everybody here, what is your perspective on switching from a 1099 to a W employee in 2025?
And in what regard?
As
Like,
far as finding a new job, when you've been self-employed for a long period of time and now you want to go and be a W-2, How do you see the landscape as far as being receptive to bringing on somebody that owned their own business for multiple years? How do you see the perspective from a recruiter's perspective and from an employer's perspective? Are they considered, oh, they own their own company for so long, they may just be trying to fill a gap here while they start their own second business? So, like, how do you see the
Yeah.
perspective, or I should say, the
Yeah.
perception of
Hmm.
Yeah.
going from a 1099 to a
Yeah.
W?
Yeah,
David,
I
do
mean,
you want to weigh in on that? Yeah.
yeah, I can weigh in a little bit. I would say there's a lot of dependencies, quite honestly. And I know that sounds like such a cop-out answer, but let me tell you what I mean. Is that if whatever your business was is similar or the same skill set as what you're applying to, it's going to be a lot easier, right? So if let's say you were a consultant and you did a lot of project work and you're PMP certified and whatever else over the course of however long you had your own business, but now you're looking for a project manager role in a company, right? That's going to be a lot easier of a transition than, let's say, you owned a plumbing business and now you want to go do something completely different than that. Because, and the reason it's more difficult broadly is that what you're going to be competing with is you're going to be competing with people that have that skill set in a much more, the relevant skill set much more recently. And so then you're probably going to have a lot of more of an uphill battle in that case. And then to get to your question, like how do employers look at it? That is varied and how they're not supposed to look at it in any real way. Okay, it's supposed to. It's do you have a skill set? Do you not have the skill set? Whether you're self-employed or employed by somebody else, those things shouldn't matter, but sometimes they do. And people, that is just the reality, unfortunately. And again, that's not legal. I would argue that's not ethical, but it exists. And it's like that idea of you've got to see the world for what it is versus what you want it to be. I would say that, again, take summarizing that back, the closer it is to your skill set, the better off you're going to be. And are you going to have a little bit more of an uphill battle? Maybe, but it'll depend. That depends on the company, and there's just really no way to know that.
Excellent.
I can jump
Thanks.
in real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, please. Uh-huh.
Sure. I have been walking that fence my whole career, basically. So I had my own business, still have my own business technically, but when I do W-2 work, that business goes on the side. And the response that I get all the time is, you're working for yourself. Why do you want to give that up? It's a control thing. They're worried that as a owner of a business, I can control my own schedule. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. As an employee, I have to toe the line. So I have to come up with a very convincing argument to say things like, one, I'm a trainer. I'm not a marketer. I'm not accounts receivable. I want to focus on what I do best and not worry about everything else. Second thing is I like the structure and support of corporate, right? Again, I'm doing everything on my own. It'd be nice to have somebody that I could bounce ideas off of, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be prepared for that. And once they're comfortable and they think, oh, yeah, he's willing to step in line, then that goes away.
That is, Bob, thank you for
That's
bringing it up. That is
really good.
absolutely spot on. That
Yep.
is great advice for people.
That's perfect. That's why it's always so good to get together in a group because you get great ideas from brainstorming. Any other questions or any other wins for the week that anybody want to bring up? I do have a couple slides I wanted to show at the very end to wrap this up in terms of my thoughts on 2025.
While you're doing that, Diana, maybe I'll just remind people if you haven't already dropped your introduction into chat, do because you never know where your
Yes.
next job opportunity may come from. There you go.
I think a number of you were on the call last month, and you do know a little bit about what I have done to start Mindful Job Alignment, but it really grew out of my own personal experience of being downsized a number of times and going through outplacement 3 times, and had a bit of a challenging time between 2004 and 2014. I went back to school, got my doctorate in holistic coaching, and I wrote my dissertation on a mindful approach to job search. I have a philosophy that the job search is not just an external process. I think that's a myth. I think it's both an internal and an external process. The internal being mind, body, spirit, and the external being tactical. To that end, I wanted to talk about mindset and some ideas for 2025 to be focusing on and taking a little inventory of where you're at coming out of 2024, going into 2025. A growth mindset is really going to be your foundation for success. And take time to assess why is a growth mindset essential for success? And how are you going to stay in a positive mindset to be able to stay in action this year? It really is looking at a new chapter of your life. It's a blank canvas to be creating on. The other thing that's very important in this process is to be mindful of your personal brand and how does that set you apart. Questions to think about are how are you going to build an authentic personal brand or continue to build on what you've been doing? What are your next action steps going to be for that? Then, of course, crafting your story in terms of a compelling resume. A question to ask is to really take a look at your resume and say, would it win any blue ribbons for the way your resume is structured right now? Does it tell a professional story? Is it ready to take on the ATS system? And are your accomplishments standing out? This is really so important because we have a tendency to list all of the duties of our job, but what about the accomplishments? And what about when we perform the duties so well that there was a great business result that we achieved for the company in terms of any metrics that we can measure? So that's something to go back and take a look at. And then, of course, your LinkedIn strategy. And we have an expert on our call, and Brenda Miller, who really delves into this whole area, but leveraging your professional network. Are you really making the most of your LinkedIn presence? And what action steps are you going to take this year to punch up your LinkedIn profile and increase your posting strategy on LinkedIn? Then networking is one of the most important components of job search. It's about building meaningful connections. So why is the strategic networking so important, and are you using it? Very important to think about. And how are you going to build in strategic networking into your job search action plan each week? So one of the things that I work on is an 8-part pathway of job search, and this really breaks it down into some detailed areas, but it can really be boiled down into 3. 1 is mindset, 2 is brand marketing, brand creation, and 3 is the action steps that you're going to take to implement during your job search. We talked about a number of things today in terms of the job market. We've talked about ways of the unemployment and things like that, but we're going to weave all this together. I'm very happy to announce that starting my first master class is going to be January 28th, 29th, and 30th. It's going to be from jobless to job ready in 3 hours. We're going to take a 3-hour deep dive, 1 hour each day on Zoom. It's a small interactive group limited to 25 participants. It'll be an hour from 11 to 12. And what we're going to do on day 1 is we're going to take a look at mindset. It's going to be reconciling the transition, which I talk about, processing through what's happened, processing through the change strategies for the mindset in terms of calming with meditation, gratitude, journaling, and how to be structuring all that in. We're also going to continue our conversation from today about state of the market and how to keep on top of industry developments that are going on in the market and where those resource tools are for you to be able to be informed and keep moving forward in the midst of a market that's really going up and down. And then we're going to wrap up the day with some personal brand creation where you can start using some techniques in terms of list making and really fine tuning your personal brand even further for how you want to market yourself. And then, of course, we'll have a little bit of homework at the end of the first day. Not much, but just a little bit of thought-provoking homework. Day 2, we're going to dive into the resume and LinkedIn. ATS formatting, talking about accomplishments and really how honing in and focusing on the types of jobs that you really want to get. Then we're going to take a top line look at LinkedIn in terms of some of the basics of banners and headlines, as well as a posting strategy that will help to get you noticed. We'll have a little bit of homework after that. And then on day 3, we're going to really focus on implementation and action plan. We're going to talk about incremental income opportunities. We're going to talk about your networking strategy, and then really assessing your communities and putting yourself into communities that are going to support you during this process. And then, of course, we'll have a celebration at the end of day 3 that you've graduated. So it's really an opportunity to build your mindset, your resume, LinkedIn, and an income plan all in 3 hours. It's a beta launch event, and I'm offering a special pricing for everybody on this call of $57 per person. And I will put the link in the chat, and you will be able to sign up. And then once you sign up and pay, I will have another registration link that I'll send out for Zoom. And I want to remind you and leave you with this. My mantra is that your job transition does not need to hurt. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing And any questions? I rushed through it, but I wanted to get in within the time. I'm very excited about bringing this to LinkedIn and bringing this to the group and then really getting the message out there because I really feel there's a lot of confusion around job search. There's a lot of confusion around building a strategy. There's definitely a lot of confusion about how to construct a resume. As I'm looking at the resumes working at Lehigh Harrison, there's so many wonderful people. Everyone has a wonderful story and they have great educations and they've had great jobs and they've had great accomplishments and it's just languishing on the piece of paper. It's not jumping out. It's not, it needs to be, think of a billboard in Times Square. That's really how you need to be presenting yourself. And it's hard when you feel like you've been kicked in the stomach by being let go. But there is a way to move forward on it. And I really want to help people and support people with it. So I'm excited. I'm excited to do it. And then eventually next month, what we're going to do is I'm expanding into people who are already working but looking. And we'll have a whole nother set of job networking for them and then masterclass at night. So that's the plans for expansion, the scaling at Mindful Job Alignment. The information for the masterclass is definitely on my website, Mindful Job Alignment. I have a separate page for that, and you can take a look at that. A little bit more on the agenda. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is saving the chat. Of course, you go to over to the chat on link on the right, and you click on the three dots and where it says save chat, you save the chat, and that will show up in your hard drive under Zoom. And it'll be in a folder, it'll have a date on it, January 10th, and that's where you can look down a text format. But all the links to everybody's profiles and everything will all be in there, as well as all the other dialogue from the chat. So we want to get everybody trained on Zoom because knowing these technology platforms are important to have on your resume as a skill set. So I think I've left everybody speechless.
Good stuff, Diana.
Any questions on anything? Good. I appreciate people. Okay, it should be the first one. It's right up on the top of the three dots. It should say save chat.
Probably the problem is I was too busy signing up for your master class.
That could be if you're toggling back and forth.
And so toggling back and forth.
Yeah.
If this is a limited space for the master class, I want to be the first one in.
Yeah, I
Also,
want to keep it. Yeah, I'm testing this, and that's why I call it a beta launch. I want to keep it easy, and I also want to keep it so people can network because the point of coming together is to build off each other's strengths and network and get to know people and that kind of a thing because ultimately that's what gets you going. I'll tell you, I'm patterning it after the job search work teams and that are done in outplacement that used to be done years ago. Now everything's virtual. But I have colleagues and friends from those times that I went through outplacement that I still have to this day.
that's cool.
And so I just think that community and brainstorming and that kind of thing, and understanding just the straight talk about what goes on with job search. And that's the unique perspective that I bring because I've been a job seeker so many times. So that's the position I bring, David. I've been a job seeker so many times. I thought I'm going to make a business out of this because
Good move.
I
Good
want to
move.
get that. I want to get the information out there because number one, it doesn't need to hurt, and number two, you can't control the market, but you can control what you do with your time.
There is an art and a science to it. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. So I'm very happy.
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have
Yep.
questions or whatever. I'm happy to answer them.
And unless y'all are staying for the relaxation, because okay, perfect. Then we'll do it very quickly. Okay. First thing we're going to do in our chairs is take 4 deep breaths. If you want, you can close your eyes. Inhale through the nose, out through the mouth. Again. 3, 4, and then starting with the top of your head, just relax. Then move down your face, your neck, your shoulders, your chest, your arms, all the way down to your hands and fingers, your stomach, your hips, your glutes, and your knees all the way down to your feet. Let everything just relax and go limp. This is a starting place from where you can start to breathe deeply. Just focus on your breathing. And then you can open your eyes. That's a starting of how you can relax yourself for meditation. And that's as simple as meditation is, really. It's breathing in and out a number of times just to center and calm yourself, and then doing the body scan from head to toe. And then once you've completed that, and then you can either open your eyes or you can keep them closed, and you can sit for a few more minutes. I would try starting with maybe 3 minutes and then increasing it to 5, and then eventually maybe 10. And if you want to have any music, there are plenty of guided meditations all over on Fitbit, on Calm, on Headspace, on YouTube. If you do want music and you do want guided, if you just want it quiet, sometimes it's just better to just sit in your chair and do this breathing and just do the body scan. And at that point, when you've relaxed yourself, that's when you can maybe take some time to journal, jot your thoughts down, make lists of ideas that come as you're sitting in silence. If any, you will have thoughts that float in and float out. Don't mind them. They're like clouds floating in and floating out. They're going to be there. But sometimes you will get an idea, an inspirational idea that will float through while you're doing this. And that's worth writing down because you will get thoughts of maybe things that you're working on. You will get inspiration that will come through at the most unusual time, but it usually happens when you're a little calmer and there's a little more space in your mind because you're not running your to-do list or something like that with anxiety. Once you calm your body down with the breathing and the body scan, you'll notice these ideas flying in and out a little more. And I'm all for just getting them down on a piece of paper, no matter how scribbled they are, because that's where you start getting some ideas. And it helps you calm down for the weekend. After this action-packed time of a lot of information from David, and then we do that, I hope that this sets you up nicely for your weekend. And please reach out with any questions that you may have. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone. And I will have the recording up on YouTube and I will be emailing you. I have everyone's email, so I'll be updating you through email.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks,
Have a
Diane.
wonderful weekend.
You
Be
too.
safe. Be
Bye.
healthy.